It's been a few months since the release of Denis Villeneuve's Dune Part 2, and after loving the film and producing a lot of content on it, I couldn't be more excited to see what the director does with the second book, Dune Messiah. That film is now happening, and for months we've been wondering how the director might approach that material and when we could actually see it. Well, we might have our first big update, because Deadline Hollywood have reported that a date for the next Denis Villeneuve film has been locked down, and that there are numerous factors that could point to it being Dune Messiah. So in this video, I'm going to be discussing what that Deadline article reported, giving you my thoughts towards it, and then also proposing some of my theories towards how Denis can actually make this work, considering that Messiah takes place many years later. There will be spoilers from the Dune Messiah book during the second half of this video, so I will warn you when I come to that if you don't want to hear anything more about it. Before I get into it though, if you want to keep up to date on any of my content surrounding the Dune films, the Dune Prophecy TV show, and beyond, then don't forget to support this upload by giving it a like rating and subscribing to the channel. But without further ado, let's dive into the new updates surrounding Dune Messiah's release date. So according to a highly credible source in Hollywood, Deadline, Warner Bros. Has rebranded the previously untitled event film slot from December the 18th, 2026 as a Denis Villeneuve film. The studio, along with Legendary, is hopeful that Villeneuve will conclude his Dune trilogy with Dune Messiah. Dune Part 2, starring Timothée Chalamet and Zendaya, has been a massive success, making Warner Bros. The first studio to surpass $1 billion globally this year. And Villeneuve has expressed that the adaptation of Messiah will depend on the success of Part 2, which of course has been overwhelmingly positive. The new Deadline article states that while there are still obstacles to overcome, such as finalising the script and cast, this project has been Villeneuve's focus. And we know that because he gave an update on the script not too long ago, saying that it was almost finished. So it got us wondering, would Denis have this script lying around for a bit longer, or would he put it into action a little sooner? Now, there are things to keep in mind when being able to even make a Messiah film this early on, and Villeneuve himself has stated that he may not rush the project, as he considers waiting for Chalamet and other actors to age up. But hearing from Deadline that it's more likely that this new date could actually be Messiah makes things very interesting. In the exact same article, it further states that the director and the studio will still collaborate on the previously announced Nuclear War: A Scenario film based on Annie Jacobsen's book. This is a story that explores how a nuclear war would unfold based on interviews conducted with military and civilian experts who have knowledge of the real-world response plans. The latest on nuclear war's development is that Villeneuve is expected to join as director, and he previously said that his next project could be outside of the Dune franchise, which originally pointed to nuclear war being the project that lands this December 2026 date. But with all that said, as Deadline points out, it's possible that the financial and critical success of Dune Part 2 has led Warner Bros. And Legendary accelerating production plans on Messiah instead. They specifically say in the article that sources close to the situation claim that Villeneuve is conflicted as he's considering proceeding with Messiah ahead of that nuclear war film. So basically, Deadline is saying that the current situation is that Denis will either make Dune Messiah or Nuclear War for that December 2026 release date. If he chooses to go ahead with Nuclear War, then we'd expect Messiah to come out 2 or 3 years after this. But if he goes ahead with Messiah first, then it's clear that there will have to be some changes to make that work. And what do I mean by that? Well, now I'm going to get into a few spoilers for Dune Messiah, and I'm going to discuss and theorise what Denis Villeneuve could do to make the events of that second book work only a few years after the release of Part 2. And again, this is a big if because, as Deadline points out, the director is not fully decided on whether Messiah or his nuclear war film will be his next. But say if it is Dune Messiah, and say it's releasing in only 2 years' time, what changes do I theorise could be made to make that story work on the big screen? Well, first off, I think there are 2 big things that would need to be changed to allow that story to be brought to screen this early. The first is the deaths caused by Paul and his Fremen army in the Holy War during the 12-year time skip in the book. Paul Atreides kills 61 billion people during that time, and he and those that followed have changed since. The other big thing that I think Denis will have to consider altering is the aging of Alia Atreides, who is 16 in the events of Dune Messiah, and on top of this, we see that she's aged in the flash forward scene featured in Dune Part 2. So starting with the deaths in Paul's name and that 12-year time jump, I think Denis will aim to cut this down to around an 8-year time jump, and I think the film will mention that Paul's Fremen army have still killed billions over the time since. If Messiah mentions that Paul has killed 40 billion people instead of 61 billion, it's still a hell of a lot of bloodshed in his name, and I don't think that this would be the biggest issue for book readers, nor would it affect the mindset and reaction to Paul in that story. Also, in keeping to this 8-year jump, the actors can be made to look slightly older, and it would fall in line a bit better with when they filmed Dune Part 2. Part 2 was finished almost a year before it came out and filmed at the end of 2022, so Messiah would essentially be coming out 4 years since they filmed the previous installment, and Villeneuve and his team would only have to make up for an extra 4 years of time in the story when it comes to aging the actors. I think this is much more approachable and believable than 12 years, and again, all the plot points we know of in Messiah can work in a very similar way. Not to mention that in a similar set of circumstances, Part 2 was supposed to have a 2-year time skip at the end of that film and feature the birth of Alia Atreides. But this jump was removed, Alia wasn't born yet, and most of the changes they did make worked and fit in line with the central direction of the story. But speaking of Alia, this now brings me onto the other challenge surrounding the adaptation of her character. So let's say the time jump is around 8 years instead of 12, this would mean that Alia would be 8 years old instead of 16, because that's the age she was after the time skip in book 1 and the 12-year time skip between that book and Messiah. So how do I theorise that Denis would approach this enormous challenge? Well, in book 1, you'll remember that Alia was supposed to be 2 years old, and by the second half of that book, she was very strange. Her character spoke like an adult in a child's body, and this was because of the Water of Life. Instead, Denis chose to make Alia unborn, but she still did communicate like an adult from the womb to both her mother and Paul. So what if in Dune Messiah we apply something similar, and instead of just being 8, Alia has grown up rapidly and physically looks like a 16-year-old, which she is in the Messiah book. She's already speaking like an adult, and her mind is far more awakened than many others at such a young age, so what's not to say Denis makes it even more apparent by having her look older too. It would allow Alia to basically be the same age as she was in the pages of the Messiah book, but it would mean that the film could again take place 8 years later instead of 12. If you think about it, even if Denis made Messiah 10 years after part 2 instead of 12, Alia would still be 4 years younger than she was in the books because of not being born at the end of part 2. So it makes me think that he might do something like this proposed age jump to make that more approachable and logical. And again, it would feed into the strangeness of Alia as a character in the Messiah book, and also the personal issues she faces in that story. She struggles to reconcile with what she is, and it takes most of that book for her to become more at peace with herself. Expanding on the weirdness of her character both in book 1 and in book 2 by making her physically look older could be a way around this huge issue of time. So now that I've discussed my own theories on how Denis might approach the two big issues surrounding Dune Messiah coming out a bit earlier, do I think that Deadline's article is legit, and is that date of December the 18th, 2026, which is also my birthday by the way, the likely date that we see the film? Well, I'm starting to think it is likely, and the two things that stand out to me in supporting this is that for one, Denis had mentioned that the script was almost complete, and two, the Deadline article does mention that they are reportedly trying to lock down actors to film that project. If that is true, then surely the actors would have a time period available for when they can film Dune Messiah. Projects and films are decided and worked out years before because actors and production members working on them need the time to be able to lock down dates well in advance. This is one of the main factors that is driving the article's rumoured date of December 2026, so surely dates have been worked out behind the scenes or are close to. And with it being confirmed that this date is for a Denis Villeneuve film, it makes it highly likely that it could be Messiah. Also, another thing to note is that if it turns out to be the nuclear war film instead, then we'd probably be looking at a 2028 to 2029 release date for Messiah. That would be around 5 years after the success of Part 2, so there'd be questions towards Messiah capitalizing on the success of that previous film. Now yes, I'm sure it would still do well, but it does become a factor that the studio would consider. So after weighing all of this information up, I'm actually starting to believe that it could be Dune Messiah on that December 2026 release date. Yes, I know that before I was more convinced that it would be a bit later on, but I must admit, hearing from Deadline that Denis is considering Messiah first and that they are trying to lock actors down for it, it does make me lean more towards it being a bit earlier. And again, if he was to make some brief changes like the ones I theorized, then who's to say it can't work? He's not completely changing the story, and if you've read Messiah, you'll know that it's a book that does need some alterations made anyway. So it will be interesting to see how this all develops, but I do trust Deadline as a credible source, and I think their report may be onto something with that proposed release date. But that was my video discussing the new article surrounding the release date of Denis Villeneuve's Dune Messiah. We'll have to see what updates we get in the following months, and regardless of what direction Denis takes, I'm very much looking forward to it. In my opinion, Part 1 and Part 2 were incredible feats of cinema, and I can only imagine what he'd do in adapting the next one. There definitely needs to be some changes made, whatever the date ends up being, and I'm confident that Denis will make the right changes to make the best film possible. But let me know down below in the comments section what you think about Deadline's article on the supposed release date of Denis Villeneuve's next film, and whether you think this will actually be Dune Messiah. For much more videos and news on Denis Villeneuve's Dune universe, then subscribe to the channel and turn on your notifications. Also, if you enjoyed this video, remember to leave a like rating and follow me on social media via the links in the description. But anyway, I hope you guys enjoyed it. I've been Cortex, and as always, make some noise.